My sister laughed when my card was declined over $4. 17 milk? Then I went to my lawyer. But this story isn't about that. It's about the moment I learned that blood doesn't mean family. I'm Harper. Arshadzil. And I lived from my quiet house in Billings, Montana. No kids. No house. Just silence and independence. Then my older sister Jean and her boyfriend Mitchell dumped their 10-year-old daughter Bailey on my doorstep for a week while they flew to Europe. Jean's last words cut through the icy air. Don't get too attached. Harper. When I get back, she won't be my responsibility anymore. The door clicked shut. I turned around slowly. Bailey stood rigid against the wall, clutching a battered backpack to her chest, eyes darting like a cornered animal. Before I could point her to the guest room, she took a shaky breath. Aunt Harper, she whispered, her voice barely there. I have a secret I need to tell you, but you can't let them know. What she revealed next didn't just shatter my peaceful life, it made my blood run absolutely cold. I stood in the silent hallway and watched the taxi's taillights disappear around the icy corner of my Billings street. The engine sound faded completely, leaving a heavy, unnatural quiet that pressed against my eardrums. I turned to face Bailey, who still clutched that battered backpack. The canvas was so worn I could see the stuffing poking through the edges. She parted her dry lips. I saw her chest rise as she took a shallow breath. But before any words came out, her eyes flicked from my face to the locked front door, and a wave of sheer terror washed over her pale features. She took a quick step backward, pulling the backpack tight against her ribs like a physical shield. She stammered, her voice shaking so hard I could barely hear her. I was going to tell you, but I cannot. If I say it, my mother will find out. She always finds out. She will know I talked. She will hate me even more. She stared at the floor, waiting. Her small hands trembled against the fabric of her faded t-shirt. She expected me to yell, to grab her by the arm and rip the secret out of her. I did not do that. I simply nodded once. I pointed toward the small guest bedroom at the end of the hall. You can put your bag in there. I said, that is your room for the week. She scurried away silently, walking on the very tips of her toes. Her bare feet barely made a whisper against the hardwood floor. She didn't even glance back at me. Dinner that evening was absolutely suffocating. I cooked a simple plate of spaghetti and meatballs, the only thing I had in the fridge. I set 2 plates on the kitchen island, poured 2 glasses of ice water, and sat down on my stool. Bailey stood near the edge of the kitchen, frozen. She didn't sit. She didn't move toward the food. She just stared at the plate with wide, hungry eyes. Her hands clasped tightly behind her back. Sit down, I told her. She climbed onto the tall stool carefully, making sure the chair did not scrape against the floor. She folded her hands in her lap and kept her head bowed. The steam rose from the pasta, but she did not reach for her silverware. Her stomach let out a loud, hollow growl. She flinched as if the natural sound of her own hunger was a crime. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for a reprimand. Eat your food. Bailey, I said. That single command flipped a switch inside her brain. She grabbed her fork and began to eat frantically, shoveling the food into her mouth at a terrifying speed. She barely chewed. She swallowed large bites whole. Her eyes darted constantly toward my hands and my face, like a starving street dog expecting a larger animal to snatch the meal away. I stopped eating. I put my fork down and just watched her. A 10-year-old child should complain about the tomato sauce. A normal kid would make a mess or try to talk about their favorite television show. Bailey did none of that. She operated in pure survival mode, silent, efficient, terrified. The absolute silence in the kitchen grew heavy and dark, Have you ever watched a child eat like that, like every bite might be their last? It makes you realize how fragile a life can be when love is replaced by fear. I reached across the kitchen island to grab the salt shaker. As my arm moved, my elbow bumped my metal fork lying on the edge of my plate. The utensil slipped off the counter and fell toward the tile floor. Clang! The sharp noise shattered the quiet room. Before the fork even stopped bouncing, Bailey reacted. She threw herself off the tall stool, hit the ground hard on her knees, and curled her small body into a tight defensive ball under the counter. Both hands slapped over the back of her head, fingers locking together to protect her skull. "I'm sorry," she shrieked. Her voice cracked with raw panic. "I am sorry, I did not mean to. Please do not hit me. I will clean it up. I am sorry." She was hyperventilating. Her entire body shook violently against the cold kitchen tiles. She gasped for air between desperate apologies. I froze in my seat. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked down at the dropped fork, then at my niece cowering under the table. I did not raise my voice. I did not make any sudden movements. I slowly pushed my chair back and lowered myself to the floor, keeping a safe distance from her. "Bailey," I said softly, my tone perfectly even. "It is okay. Look at me." I dropped it. "It was my fault. Not yours. You are safe here." She did not uncurl. She kept her arms wrapped tightly around her head, rocking back and forth slightly, still bracing for a blow that was never going to come from me. In that horrifying moment, the ugly truth became undeniably clear. This was not the behavior of a well-disciplined child. This was not strict parenting. This was the raw, unfiltered reflex of a severely abused kid. Jean and Mitchell were actively breaking her spirit through constant fear and violence. My sister was a monster. I sat on the kitchen floor and watched this broken child tremble, realizing my quiet, independent life was officially over. That evening, I cooked a simple plate of spaghetti and meatballs. I set 2 plates on the kitchen island, poured 2 glasses of ice water, and sat down on my stool. I picked up my fork. Bailey stood near the edge of the kitchen. She did not sit. She did not move toward the hot food. Her eyes were locked on the plate wide. Hungry. Desperate. Her hands remained clasped behind her back, fingers white-knuckled. "Sit down," I said. She climbed onto the tall stool in slow motion. Making absolutely sure the chair did not scrape against the floor, she folded her hands in her lap, kept her head bowed. The steam from the pasta curled upward, but she didn't reach for the silverware. Her stomach let out a loud, hollow growl, the kind of sound that announces real, gnawing hunger. She flinched, as if the natural noise of her own empty belly was a crime. She squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for a reprimand. "Eat your food." "Bailey?" That single command flipped a switch inside her brain. She grabbed the fork and began to eat. But it wasn't normal eating. It was frantic, desperate consumption. She shoveled the spaghetti into her mouth at a terrifying speed. She barely chewed the meatballs. She swallowed large bites whole, barely pausing to breathe. Her eyes darted constantly to my hands, to my face, to the plate, back to my hands. She ate exactly like a starving street dog that expects a bigger animal to snatch the meal away at any second. I stopped eating. I put my fork down and just watched her. A 10-year-old child should complain about the tomato sauce being too sweet. A normal kid would make a mess, drop noodles on the floor, try to tell me about their favorite cartoon. Bailey did none of that. She operated in pure survival mode, every muscle tense, every bite a race against time. The silence in the kitchen grew heavy, dark. I reached across the island to grab the salt shaker. As my arm moved, my elbow bumped my own metal fork lying on the edge of the plate. The utensil slipped off the counter, flipped once in the air, and hit the tile floor. Clang! The sharp noise shattered the quiet room. Before the fork even stopped bouncing on the floor, Bailey reacted. She didn't just jump, she practically threw herself off the stool. Her knees hit the ground hard. She curled her small body into a tight, defensive ball under the counter. Both hands slapped over the back of her head, fingers locking together to protect her skull and face. "I am sorry," she shrieked. Her voice cracked with raw panic. "I am sorry, I did not mean to. Please do not hit me. I will clean it up. I am sorry." She was hyperventilating, gasping for air between desperate apologies, her entire body shaking against the cold kitchen tiles. I froze on my stool. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stared at the dropped fork. Then at my niece cowering under the table, a little girl who had just been told she was safe. Yet the sound of a falling utensil triggered a full-blown terror response. I did not raise my voice. I did not make any sudden movements. I slowly pushed my chair back and lowered myself to the floor, keeping a safe distance from her. "Bailey," I said softly, my tone perfectly even. "It is okay. Look at me." I dropped it. "It was my fault, not yours. You are safe here." She did not uncurl. She kept her arms wrapped tightly around her head, rocking back and forth slightly. I still bracing for a blow that was never going to come from me. Have you ever had to sit on your own kitchen floor and watch a child expect to be beaten for a dropped fork that moment? I knew the ugly truth beyond any doubt. This was not strict parenting. This was the raw, unfiltered reflex of a severely abused kid. Jean and Mitchell were actively breaking her spirit through constant fear and violence. My sister was a monster. I stayed on the floor, cross-legged, the cold tile seeping through my jeans. Bailey's rocking gradually slowed, but she still hadn't lifted her head. I could hear her ragged breaths, the occasional hiccup of a held-back sob. The kitchen was silent, except for that no-ticking clock. No hum of the refrigerator. Just a little girl curled into herself, waiting for a blow that would never come from me. I didn't move closer. I didn't reach out. I knew instinctively that any sudden touch would shatter the fragile calm I was trying to build. So I just sat there, my voice low and steady. "You don't have to be sorry. You didn't do anything wrong. The fork fell. That's all. It's okay." Her fingers were still laced over the back of her head, knuckles white. She was trembling so hard I could see the fine vibration in her shoulders. I waited. 2 minutes. 3. Finally, she let out a long, shuddering breath and slowly, so slowly lowered her hands. She didn't uncurl, but she tilted her face just enough to look at me from under her arm. Her eyes were red, vet, and utterly hollow. Have you ever had to look into the eyes of a 10-year-old who has already learned that adults are a source of pain? Not safety. That moment, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't discipline. This wasn't strict parenting. This was the direct, undeniable result of systematic abuse. The way she flinched at a metallic clang, the way she covered her head, the way she apologized for a noise I had made. I thought about Jean's smirk at the door. I thought about Mitchell's cold silence. And I understood, with absolute clarity, that my quiet, independent life was over. I could not send Bailey back into that house. I could not pretend this was a 1-week babysitting job. The girl on my floor was broken by people who shared my blood, and I was the only person standing between her and more of the same. I stayed on the kitchen floor for a long time. Bailey eventually uncurled, inch by inch, and sat up. She didn't look at me. She stared at the fallen fork. I reached over slowly, picked it up, and set it in the sink. "Let's finish dinner," I said. She nodded, climbed back onto her stool, and ate the rest of her spaghetti in silence, still fast, still careful, but now with a tiny, fragile thread of trust beginning to form between us. I was not going to break that thread. I was going to use it to pull her out of the dark. 2 days crawled by in that strange, suspended quiet. Bailey and I existed in a bubble of careful politeness. She ate what I put in front of her, spoke only when spoken to, and flinched at every unexpected noise. I kept the house warm, made sure the TV was on low, and gave her space to breathe. But the air between us was thick with unspoken things. She still hadn't told me her secret. I didn't push. I knew the dam would break on its own. It broke at 2:00 a.m. On Monday, the sound jolted me out of a shallow sleep, a distinct rattling sleep, like paper being shuffled too quickly, followed by the soft clink of metal against wood. My house never makes noise at night. He sat up in bed, heart hammering, ears straining. There it was again, a drawer sliding open. Someone was in my home office. I threw off the blankets and stepped barefoot into the hallway. The cold hardwood sent a chill up my spine, but I moved silently. Following the noise to the closed door, I pushed it open a crack and flicked the light switch. Bailey gasped. The sound was sharp, broken. She was kneeling on the floor in front of my desk, her small hands buried deep inside the second drawer, the one I never locked. A thick manila folder lay on the carpet beside her, papers spilling out. For one long second, neither of us moved. Her eyes were wide, wild, caught in the headlights. Then she completely shattered. She fell forward, curling her thin body into a tight ball on the floor. The sobs that tore out of her were raw, uncontrollable, not the quiet crying of a child caught stealing cookies, but the desperate, hyperventilating wail of someone who knows they've failed a life or death test. Her shoulders heaved. She choked on her own tears, gasping for air between shuddering wails. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry," she repeated. Each word a plea. I didn't yell. I didn't grab her arm. I lowered myself to the floor, sat cross-legged about a foot away from her, and waited. The only sound in the room was her ragged breathing and the distant hum of the refrigerator. I sat there, watching her small body shake, remembering the fork clang 3 days ago. This was the same reflex, only now I knew it was aimed at a much bigger failure. Have you ever had to wait in silence while someone you care about falls apart? Knowing that the wrong word could send them deeper into the dark, that's what I did. I waited. I let her cry until her sobs faded to hiccups, until her breath slowed, until she finally, slowly, lifted her wet face from the floor and looked at me. "Tell me exactly what you were looking for." I kept my voice firm but not loud. Bailey's breath hitched. She pressed her palms against the floor, still trembling, then slowly pushed herself upright. She wouldn't look at me. Her eyes stayed fixed on a spot just left of my knee. "The papers," she whispered. "The ones with the red stamps? My mother made me memorize where you keep them." I felt my stomach drop. When did she make you memorize that?" "Last month. She came over for a surprise visit. She said she missed me." Bailey's voice was hollow, mechanical. "She brought me into your office while you were making coffee. It was only 5 minutes. She pointed at that drawer, the second one down, and told me to remember exactly where it was. She said Mitchell needed those papers. She made me repeat the list until I got it right. I asked her what was on the list. She recited it like a programmed robot, her eyes still fixed on the floor. My personal identification number, the original property deed, the last 3 years of tax returns, and any official document that had my signature on it. The pieces clicked together in my head like a lock snapping shut. Identity theft. A fraudulent mortgage. They were going to drain the equity out of my house, leave me with nothing but debt, and disappear with the cash. My own sister had orchestrated a federal crime under my roof. Bailey's voice cracked. Mitchell gave me an old phone. He said I have to take pictures of every single page and email them to him before Friday. If I don't send them. Or if you catch me. She stopped, her face crumpling. What did Jean say she would do? Bailey. She buried her face in her hands. She said she would throw me away. She promised she would drop me off at a state orphanage and never come back. She told me I'm just a burden. And this is the only way I can pay for my food. The sheer evil of it paralyzed me. My sister had weaponized her own child, turned her into a thief, under the threat of complete abandonment. Jean and Mitchell were sipping wine in a European hotel, while this terrified girl was forced to commit a felony for the price of a meal. I reached out slowly and closed the open drawer. I picked up the fallen folder and set it on the desk. You are not going to an orphanage, I said coldly. And you are not taking any pictures. I am going to stop them. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your self-respect for me? That choice was already made. I looked at Bailey's tear-streaked face, at the yellowing bruise I had seen on her ribs at the mall, at the trembling hands that had been forced to memorize the map of my ruin. There was no choice at all. I was going to burn their whole scheme to the ground. The next morning, I decided I couldn't let Bailey spend another minute locked in that state of pure terror. The house felt like a pressure cooker, every silence loaded with her fear. So I grabbed my keys, told her we were going out, and drove us straight to the largest shopping mall in Billings. The car ride was completely silent. She sat stiff in the passenger seat, her hands pressed flat on her thighs, eyes glued to the window. Afraid to even blink wrong, I didn't push conversation. I just drove. We walked through the heavy glass doors into the bustling food court. The noise hit us kids laughing, parents yelling, the hum of dozens of conversations. Bailey shrank back, her shoulders curling inward. I steered her directly toward a bright ice cream parlor with a display case packed with colorful tubs. She stopped a few feet behind me, her hands gripping the bottom edge of her faded shirt, waiting for a scolding. All right. Bailey. I turned to face her directly. What flavor do you want? She blinked. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She stared up at me like I had just asked her to solve a calculus problem. Then her eyes darted left and right, scanning for a trap. Me, she whispered, pointing a trembling finger at her own chest. I get to pick. Of course you do, I said, keeping my voice light. Pick whatever you want. Chocolate. Vanilla. Strawberry. It's your choice. She stepped forward slowly, as if the floor might dissolve under her feet. Her eyes were wide as saucers, scanning every single tub in the case. She studied the options for what felt like a full minute, her lips moving silently, weighing the consequences of picking wrong. Finally, her shaking finger landed on the strawberry. That one. She breathed. It was a simple choice for a 10-year-old, but for her, it was a monumental victory. She had never been allowed to have a preference. Jean had stripped away her basic right to want anything. I bought her a large scoop in a waffle cone and handed it over. She took it with both hands, holding it like it might explode. Then she took a tiny, cautious lick, her eyes darting to my face to check my reaction. I smiled. Her shoulders dropped an inch. She took another lick. Then a bite. And a soft, quiet joy spread across her face. She wasn't devouring it like the spaghetti. She was savoring it. Have you ever seen a child so afraid of wanting something that even a scoop of ice cream feels dangerous? I stood there watching her, realizing that this small act, letting her choose, was the first crack in the invisible chains Jean had wrapped around her. And I knew, right then, that I would break every single link. We left the ice cream parlor with sticky fingers and a lightness in the air that hadn't existed before. Bailey finished her cone in careful, deliberate bites, her tongue catching each drip. I decided not to waste the momentum. We were already at the mall. And she needed more than a sugar rush. She needed armor. Armor against the cold Montana winter. But also against the ugliness waiting for her at home. I marched her straight into the biggest children's clothing store I could find. The racks exploded with color. Winter coats in neon pink. Fleece-lined dresses in deep purple. Thick denim jeans stacked by the dozens. Bailey immediately shrank back. Her body language screamed retreat. She instinctively veered toward the clearance rack in the darkest corner, where a single, shapeless gray sweater hung. 3 sizes too big and utterly joyless. She grabbed it like it was the only thing she was allowed to touch. "No," I said gently, prying the gray fabric from her fingers and placing it back on the rack. "We are not doing that today. Look around this whole store. Bailey, find the colors you actually like. Pick the things you want to wear." She stared up at me, searching my face for hidden anger. For the trap she expected to spring shut, she found none. A tiny spark of hope flickered in her eyes. It took 20 minutes of coaxing her, hovering near the doorway. Me standing by the pink jackets. Waiting. Slowly. Tentatively. She started touching the fabrics. She pulled out a soft pink winter coat with fluffy faux fur lining. She grabbed a pair of proper denim jeans, the kind with reinforced knees. Then she found it a warm, fleece-lined purple dress, the color of twilight, with little embroidered flowers around the collar. She held it against her chest and looked at me. "This one," she whispered. "That one is perfect." I led her into the fitting room area, a row of curtained stalls. She struggled with the broken zipper of her oversized, threadbare jacket, the kind you'd find at a thrift store for 50 cents. I stepped in to help. I pulled the heavy jacket off her narrow shoulders, then gently lifted the hem of her faded t-shirt to slide it over her head. She raised her arms obediently, like she'd been trained. The shirt came up a few inches, exposing her ribs just above the waistband of her underwear. I stopped breathing. Right along her left side, a bruise spread across the skin, faint yellow at the edges. The unmistakable mark of a deliberate pinch or a vicious strike that had healed days ago. It sat there against her pale, fragile frame like a silent accusation. Her underwear was threadbare, heavily hand-stitched in places, the elastic completely gone. The contrast between that ugly yellowing mark and her pathetic, patched clothes painted a horrifying picture of her daily reality behind closed doors. Have you ever had a moment where rage and sorrow hit you at the same time? So hard you can barely move. I stood there, frozen, staring at that bruise. And I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. Not yet. I quickly pulled the purple dress over her head, hiding the evidence before she could see my reaction and retreat into her shell. She smoothed the soft fleece down her sides, then turned to face the full-length mirror. The heavy, terrified look vanished from her face, replaced by a soft, genuine glow. She looked like a real child again, without a word. She turned away from the mirror and walked straight into me, wrapping her small arms tightly around my waist, burying her face deep into my coat. "This is the first time someone bought me new clothes," she whispered against the fabric. The last defensive wall around my heart crumbled completely. I wrapped my arms around her trembling shoulders, pulled her close, and let the silent tears stream down my face. I made a fierce promise to myself right then I would destroy the people who put that bruise on her ribs. I held her tighter, breathing in the faint scent of new fabric mixed with the lingering strawberry from the ice cream. Her small body fit perfectly against mine, fragile but warm. And for the first time in 2 days, she wasn't trembling. She wasn't bracing for impact. She was just leaning, trusting. I didn't want to let go. I wanted to stand there forever, frozen in that moment where she finally felt safe. But eventually she pulled back just enough to look up at me, her eyes still wet but no longer terrified. There was a flicker of something I hadn't seen before, hope. Maybe. Or the beginning of belief that the world didn't have to hurt her. Nobody ever bought me new clothes. She repeated. Her voice still a whisper but steadier now. Not even for my birthday. Mom said I didn't deserve them because I just ruined them. Those words punched the air out of my lungs. I forced myself to smile. To keep my voice light, even as my insides twisted into knots. Well, now you have them. And you're going to wear them every single day if you want. They're yours. She looked down at the purple dress, running her fingers over the soft fleece as if she couldn't believe it was real. Then she looked back at me, her lower lip quivering. Can I wear it tomorrow? You can wear it tonight if you want. A tiny laugh escaped her, the first sound of genuine joy I'd heard since she arrived. It was small, almost swallowed, but it was real. I squeezed her shoulder and led her to the register, paying for the pile of clothes she'd chosen, the pink coat, the jeans, the fleece dress, a few colorful sweaters, and a pair of proper winter boots that actually fit her feet. The total came to just over $200. I would have paid 10 times that to see that look on her face. We walked out of the store with 3 shopping bags, and Bailey held the handle of one as if it were made of gold. She kept glancing down at the bag, then at me, as if checking I hadn't vanished. Have you ever had a moment when a single embrace changed everything? When someone's arms around you said more than any words ever could? As we headed toward the car, I looked down at her small hand clutching the bag and made a silent vow that went far beyond the bruise on her ribs. I would not just destroy the people who hurt her. I would rebuild her world from the ground up. Brick by brick. With safety and love and the right to choose her own strawberry ice cream. She deserved a childhood. Not a survival camp. Later that night, after she'd put on the purple dress and twirled in front of the hallway mirror, I watched her fall asleep in the guest room, her face peaceful for the first time. I stood in the doorway and let the tears come silent. Hot and determined. I was going to fight a war for this girl. And I was going to win, but a child's word, even a terrified, honest word, isn't enough to lock anyone away. I learned that harsh truth on Tuesday afternoon. The next day, I waited until Bailey was curled up on the guest bed, her breathing slow, and even the purple dress was folded carefully on the nightstand, as if she was afraid to wrinkle it. I slipped out the front door, sat in my cold car, and dialed my family lawyer. Mr. Davis. He's handled my grandparents' estate for years. A no-nonsense man in his 60s who doesn't waste words. I gripped the steering wheel and laid it all out. The midnight drawer raid. Bailey's tear-drenched confession. The list of documents Mitchell wanted, property deed. Tax returns. Signature samples. The threat of being thrown away if she failed. I have a witness, I said. A 10-year-old who saw and heard everything. There was a long pause on the other end. Then Mr. Davis's voice came through. Flat and sober. Harper. Listen to me carefully. A 10-year-old's uncorroborated testimony holds virtually zero weight in a criminal court. A good defense attorney will tear her apart on the stand. They'll say she's confused, that she misunderstood adult conversation. Or worse, they'll claim you coached her, manipulated her so you could steal custody. So I'm supposed to just wait until they commit the fraud, I snapped. No, he said. But you need more than a child's whisper. You need direct, irrefutable evidence. You need a recorded confession. The word recorded hit me like a splash of ice water. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the gray January sky through the windshield. Mitchell and Jean were sipping wine in a European hotel, comfortable and arrogant, while I sat in a cold car with nothing but a broken little girl's story. Have you ever been told that the truth you know isn't enough? That you have to catch evil on tape for anyone to believe you? I ended the call, my jaw tight. Then I walked back inside, went to the guest room, and gently woke Bailey. She sat up immediately, eyes wide with the old fear. "We're going to do something hard," I told her, "but it's the only way to make them stop forever." I explained the plan. She would call her mother, pretend she was still following orders, and let Jean's venom flow freely while I recorded every word from the shadows. Bailey's face went pale. Her hands started shaking, but she looked up at me at the purple dress hanging on the chair, at the new boots by the bed, and she gave a small, trembling nod. That evening, we set the trap. That evening, I waited until the last sliver of daylight bled out behind the frozen Montana hills. The house was dark except for the single pendant light above the kitchen island. Bailey stood beside me, her hands gripping the edge of the counter so hard her knuckles were white. I pulled her prepaid phone, the one Mitchell had given her, out of my pocket. It was a cheap plastic thing. The screen cracked in one corner. I placed it on the counter and propped it against a heavy water glass. Then I stepped back and checked the angle. Only Bailey's face would be visible in the frame. Nothing else. No sign of me. No hint of the kitchen behind her that might give away my position. I looked at her. Her breathing was shallow. Her eyes fixated on the phone like it was a live grenade. "You can do this," I said softly. "I'll be right there." Pressed against the refrigerator. "I won't make a sound. If you get scared, just look at the counter. Don't look at me. Keep your voice small and scared. You don't have to act. Just be yourself. Tell them you're still looking. Tell them you haven't found the papers yet." She swallowed hard. A single tear slid down her cheek, but she wiped it away with the back of her hand before it could fall. "What if she knows I'm lying?" she whispered. "She always knows." "She won't," I said, "because you're not lying. You really are afraid. And that fear is the most honest thing in this room." I held up my own smartphone, the camera app already open, the red record button waiting. I pressed myself flat against the refrigerator door. The cold metal seeped through my sweater. I gave Bailey a silent countdown with my fingers. 3, 2, 1. She tapped the screen. The video call rang once, twice, 3 times. The connection hiccuped. Then Mitchell's face appeared on the little screen. He was lounging on a pristine white hotel bed, a glass of dark red wine in his hand. The room behind him was all marble and gold trim. He leaned close to the camera, his lips curling into an impatient sneer. "Well," he demanded, "have you found the papers with the state seals yet? Did you check the second drawer your mother showed you?" Bailey's voice came out small, trembling. "Exactly right. I'm looking. I haven't found them yet." Mitchell rolled his eyes and sighed loud enough for the microphone to catch every ounce of contempt. Before he could speak again, Jean shoved him out of the frame. Her face filled the screen, eyes wide with rage. The lavish hotel room, a grotesque backdrop to her venom. Have you ever had to watch a child you love be verbally eviscerated while you stayed silent? Phone in hand, waiting for the confession you knew was coming. That was the moment I understood that sometimes silence is the loudest weapon. Jean hissed into the microphone. "Listen to me very closely. You useless brat. We are not playing games. You know exactly what we need. You know exactly where it is. If I do not receive those pictures in my email by Friday, you better pack your trash bags. You are not coming back to my house. You prepare to live on the streets. I will drop you at the nearest shelter and completely forget you ever existed." Bailey whimpered. She stared at the counter. The fear in her eyes was real, raw, and unforced. "Do not fail me," Jean snapped. "Friday." The call ended. The screen went black. Silence. Bailey let out a long, shaky breath, then turned to look at me. I lowered my phone and pressed the red stop button. The video file saved instantly to my secure cloud storage. I had it all, the aggressive tone, the mention of the drawer, the confirmation of the state seal documents, the threat of child abandonment. Ironclad. Perfect. I walked over and pulled Bailey into a tight hug. You did it, I whispered. Now they can't hurt you anymore. That evening, we set the perfect trap. Bailey's small hands trembled as she reached for the prepaid phone, but she didn't hesitate. I checked the camera angle one last time, only her face in the frame. The kitchen counter behind her. I pressed myself flat against the refrigerator. Phone in hand. Recording. I gave her the silent countdown. 3, 2, 1. She initiated the video call. It rang once, twice, 3 times. The connection established. Mitchell's face appeared on the screen. He was lounging on a pristine white hotel bed, a glass of dark red wine in his hand, the luxurious duvet bunched behind him. He leaned close to the camera, his eyes scanning the frame for any sign of me. He didn't see me. He saw only Bailey. Well, he demanded, his voice dripping with impatience. He didn't say property deed or mortgage. He used the code they'd drilled into her. Have you found the papers with the state seals yet? Did you check the second drawer your mother showed you? Bailey swallowed hard. Her lips parted. But for a long second, no words came out. I could see her throat working, her breath catching. Then she stammered, her voice thin and shaking. I am looking? I have not found them yet. Mitchell rolled his eyes. An exaggerated, theatrical gesture of pure annoyance. He let out a loud sigh. Unbelievable, he muttered under his breath, then raised his voice again. Look harder. We don't have all week. Before he could continue, a hand shot into the frame. Jean shoved him hard in the shoulder, pushing him out of the camera's view. Her face appeared, eyes blazing with rage. The soft hotel lighting doing nothing to soften her sharp, predatory expression. I held my breath. The recording kept rolling. This was the moment, the one that would seal her fate. I held my breath. Phone still recording. Pressed flat against the cold refrigerator. On the tiny screen, Jean's face filled the frame. The contrast was sickening behind her. The soft white headboard of a 5-star hotel room. A crystal lamp glowing on the nightstand. In front of it, her eyes were narrowed to slits. Her lips curled in a snarl that transformed her face into something feral. Listen to me very closely. You useless brat, she hissed. Her voice was low and venomous, each word dripping with contempt. We are not playing games with you. You know exactly what we need. You know exactly where it is. That drawer, the second one, the papers with the state seals. Bailey's breath hitched. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, her small body rigid. I saw her knuckles go white where she gripped the edge of the counter. Jean leaned closer to the camera, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. If I do not receive those pictures in my email by Friday, you better pack your trash bags. You are not coming back to my house. You understand me, I will drop you at the nearest shelter and completely forget you ever existed. You will be nobody's problem. A low whimper escaped Bailey's throat. She didn't cry, she was too terrified for tears. She just stared. Frozen. Her lips parted. Do not fail me. Jean snapped. Hit on sharp as a blade. Friday. The screen went black. The call had ended. For a long moment, the kitchen was completely silent. Bailey's hand slowly lowered the phone to the counter. Her shoulders began to shake. She turned to look at me, and I saw the full weight of her mother's words collapsing onto her. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but she didn't make a sound. I looked down at my own phone. The red recording indicator was still glowing. I pressed stop. The file saved automatically to my cloud storage every single word, every inflection of Jean's hateful voice, the unmistakable threat of abandonment. I had it all. I set the phone down and pulled Bailey into my arms. She buried her face in my shoulder, her small body trembling against mine. "It's over," I whispered. "You did exactly what you needed to do. Now I'm going to make sure she can never hurt you again." She didn't answer. She just held on tighter. And I let her, my mind already racing through the next steps, the court order, the police. The moment Jean would finally face the consequences of weaponizing her own child. Friday was 3 days away. We would be ready. I looked down at my phone screen. The red recording indicator had turned to a small checkmark file saved to the cloud. I tapped the icon and watched the file upload bar fill completely, then disappear. A wave of cold relief washed over me. It was there. Secure. Irrefutable. Bailey was still shaking, her breath coming in uneven gasps. I set the phone on the counter and took her face in both hands, tilting her chin up so she had to meet my eyes. "Look at me," I said softly. "You did it. You were so brave. And now I have everything I need to stop them." She blinked, tears clinging to her lashes. "Did it work? Did you get what you needed?" I picked up my phone and pulled up the video file. I played the last 20 seconds back Jean's voice. Sharp and venomous, promising to throw her away if she didn't deliver the documents by Friday. The threat was unmistakable. The mention of the drawer, the state seal papers, the deadline. Every single word was captured in crystal clear audio. Bailey watched the screen, her jaw tight. When the clip ended, she let out a long, shaky breath. "She really said that," she whispered, more to herself than to me. "It's on there. It's on there," I confirmed. "And it's not just on this phone. It's saved to a secure cloud account that only I can access. Even if they somehow got this phone, the video is already backed up 3 different ways. Nobody can erase it." I showed her the confirmation screen, the file name, the date stamp, the green check mark. She stared at it like it was a lifeline. In a way, it was. I pulled her into a hug, her face pressed into my shoulder again. "You are never going back to that house," I said, my voice low and fierce. "I promise you." "Bailey, they are done. The only thing they get now is a court date and a prison cell." She nodded against my shirt, her grip on my waist tightening. "I trust you," she murmured. I held her until her breathing steadied, until the tremors stopped. Then I let go and smiled down at her. "How about some hot chocolate?" She managed a small, watery smile. "Okay." I poured milk into a saucepan and turned on the stove. While it heated, I sent a quick text to Mr. Davis. Got the confession. Full video saved to cloud. Sending link. His reply came within seconds. "Excellent. Friday will be interesting." I looked over at Bailey, who was now sitting at the kitchen island, watching the steam rise from the pot. Her shoulders were still hunched, but the terror in her eyes had dulled to something like cautious hope. She had handed me the weapon. Now I just had to swing it. Friday afternoon arrived with a low gray sky that pressed against the windows like a held breath. I stood at the front living room window, my fingers resting on the cold glass, watching the street. The taxi turned into the driveway at 3:47 p.m. I remember checking the clock because my stomach clenched so hard I thought I might be sick. The yellow car crunched over the gravel and stopped directly in front of the porch. I watched them step out. Jean first, her designer suitcase gleaming under the dim light. Then Mitchell, moving with lazy confidence, a leather duffel slung over one shoulder. They laughed about something, a sharp, careless sound that cut through the frozen air. Bailey stood a few feet behind me. I could feel her trembling before I even turned around. The vibration traveled through the floorboards, a low hum of pure fear. She was barely breathing, Her hands pressed so tight against her thighs that her knuckles were bone white. I reached back without looking, my hand finding her small shoulder. It was shaking under my palm like a trapped bird. I squeezed firmly, and she let out a tiny, muffled sob. "Stay calm," I whispered. "Stay exactly behind me. Do not step forward. Do not say a word. Let me handle everything." The taxi pulled away. The front door swung open before the tires had even cleared the driveway. Jean stepped inside first. She dropped her heavy travel bag onto the floor, a loud thud against the hardwood, and immediately launched into a sickeningly fake performance. "Oh, my sweet girl," she squealed, her voice bouncing off the walls. I missed my daughter so much. She rushed forward with her arms wide, wrapping Bailey in a stiff, awkward hug. Bailey did not hug her back. She kept both arms pinned rigidly to her sides, her face blank, staring at the wall like she had already disappeared inside herself. Mitchell walked through the door next. He did not say hello. He did not look at Bailey. His eyes scanned the living room, cold and calculating, then locked onto the hallway, the closed door of my home office. He was already planning his move. I kept my face neutral. "How was the trip?" I asked. My voice flat. I turned toward the kitchen. "Let me get you both some water." I walked to the sink, my back to them, and reached up for 2 glass tumblers. My hands were steady. I turned on the faucet, watching the dark reflection in the microwave door. Behind me, Jean dropped her fake smile. She nudged Mitchell sharply in the ribs with her elbow and jerked her chin toward the hallway. He nodded once and stepped silently away from the living room, moving like a predator toward the office. He thought I was oblivious. He thought he was seconds away from stealing my life. I turned off the running water, leaving the 2 empty glasses in the sink. I didn't look back. I could see everything in the dark reflection of the microwave door, Jean standing by the couch, her arms crossed, watching the hallway. Mitchell had his hand on the brass doorknob of my office. He turned it slowly, silently, and pushed the door open just a crack. I let him believe he was winning. I let him think I was still fumbling with the glasses. I counted 3 heartbeats, then turned around. I walked back into the living room with a thick manila folder held tight in my right hand. Mitchell had his shoulder against the office door now, 1 foot already inside. "Mitchell," I called out sharply. He stopped dead. His entire body went rigid. Then he turned slowly, pasting on a fake, lazy smile. "Yeah," he said, his voice too casual. I didn't answer. I walked directly to the glass coffee table in the center of the room, raised my arm, and slammed the heavy folder down onto the surface. The sound cracked through the air, smack, and Jean jumped backward like she'd been shocked. "What the hell is that?" Mitchell demanded, dropping all pretense. He left the office doorway and strode toward me, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood. He snatched the folder off the table and flipped the cover open. I watched his face. The color drained from it in less than a second. Inside was not my property deed, not my tax returns, not my signature samples. Inside was a cleanly printed copy of an emergency protective petition, addressed to the state family court, and sitting on top of it, a small silver USB drive. I had labeled it with a thick black marker, "Video Confession, Fraud and Abuse." Mitchell picked up the drive and read the label. His arrogant confidence vanished. He stared at the legal document underneath, saw his own name printed next to the words, "Criminal Fraud," and his jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle twitch. "What the hell is this?" he roared. He crushed the court papers in his fist, the edges crumpling under his grip. "You recorded us!" Jean screamed from behind me. I didn't turn. I kept my eyes on Mitchell as he lifted his head. His face twisted with fury, and took a step toward me. "Get back!" Mitchell lunged, his arms swinging wide. I threw myself sideways, but his shoulder caught me hard in the chest. I slammed into the arm of the sofa. The breath knocked out of me. Jean screamed, not in fear, in fury, and bolted past me toward Bailey, who had retreated into the corner of the living room, her hands over her face. "You little traitor!" Jean shrieked. Reaching for her daughter's hair, I pushed off the couch and grabbed Jean's wrist, yanking her back. "Don't you dare touch her," I shouted. Mitchell spun around, his face purple with rage. He abandoned the folder and charged at me again, both hands raised to grab my throat. Time seemed to slow. I saw the veins bulging in his neck, the spit flying from his lips, the pure hatred in his eyes. Then the wail of police sirens tore through the frozen street. Red and blue strobe slashed across the living room windows, painting the walls in urgent flashes. Mitchell froze mid-stride, his boots skidding on the hardwood. His head whipped toward the window. Heavy boots pounded onto the front porch. The door I had left it unlocked on purpose flew open and crashed against the wall. 2 uniformed Billings police officers stormed inside, weapons drawn, their voices cutting through the chaos like knives. "Get on the ground! Now!" the taller officer roared, his gun trained on Mitchell's chest. Mitchell hesitated one stupid, reckless second of indecision. The second officer didn't wait. He lunged forward, grabbed Mitchell by the collar, and slammed him face first into the hardwood floor. The impact shook the glass coffee table and sent the manila folder skidding across the rug. Mitchell groaned, his cheek pressed flat against the cold wood. The officer drove a knee into his lower back, twisted his arms behind him, and snapped the metal handcuffs around his wrists in one smooth motion. "You have the right to remain silent," the officer recited, his voice flat and practiced. Mitchell's head was twisted sideways, his eyes wide with disbelief. He was still wearing his expensive leather jacket from the flight. It was over. I stood there, chest heaving, legs trembling, watching the man who had tried to steal my home and terrorize my niece get dragged to his knees. Jean stood frozen beside the couch, her face drained of all color, her mouth hanging open. She didn't scream anymore. She didn't lunge. She just stared at her boyfriend in handcuffs. Realizing the trap had closed around her too, I barely had time to catch my breath before a sharp click echoed from the front door. A woman in a severe gray suit stepped inside, an official lanyard swinging against her chest. She held a leather briefcase and moved with the calm authority of someone who had done this 100 times. The officer holding Mitchell looked up and nodded once. The woman, the CPS agent, didn't even glance at the man on the floor. Her eyes locked onto Jean. Jean's survival instincts kicked in instantly. She threw herself forward, arms outstretched, face twisted into a mask of desperate tears. "Thank God you're here," she wailed, her voice cracking with perfect false anguish. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "My sister is crazy. She kidnapped my daughter. She held us hostage. Please. You have to arrest her. She's trying to steal my baby." She was good. A stunning performance. For a split second, I wondered if the agent would actually believe her. The agent didn't blink. She set her briefcase on the coffee table, calmly unlatched it, and pulled out a thick stack of official papers. The top document was stamped with a red seal, a court order. She held it up directly in front of Jean's face, close enough that Jean had to cross her eyes to read it. "Jean," the agent said, her voice flat and ice cold, "this is an emergency protective custody order, signed by a federal judge 20 minutes ago. We have reviewed the video confession your sister submitted. Your parental rights are temporarily suspended. Effective immediately." Jean's fake tears vanished as if someone had flipped a switch. Her face went slack. Then it contorted into something ugly, pure, primal rage. Her jaw dropped, then snapped shut. "What? No, that's a lie. She's lying. She spun to face me." Spit flying from her lips. You bitch, you recorded me. You set me up. She lunged. Straight at me. The officer nearest her grabbed her arm mid-swing and twisted it behind her back. Jean thrashed violently, her heels scraping against the hardwood. Get off me, let me go, she's the criminal. Not me. Her voice rose to a shriek, echoing off the walls. She kicked the air, spat on the floor, fought like a cornered animal. The second officer came over and together they forced her hands behind her back. The handcuffs clicked shut with a metallic snap that silenced her for one breath. Then she started cursing. A stream of profanities so vile it made the officers exchange a look. She was still screaming as they dragged her toward the front door. Her head twisted over her shoulder. Eyes locked on me. Burning with hatred. I will destroy you. You hear me, I will rot in hell before I let you keep her. They pulled her past the threshold. I watched her stumble down the front steps, her designer boots scraping against the frozen concrete. A patrol car waited at the curb, its rear door open. They folded her inside and slammed the door shut. The sound was final. I stood in the living room, the quiet rushing back in. The only noise was the soft click of the CPS agent's pen as she signed a form on her clipboard. She looked up at me, her expression softening. Bailey, she asked. I nodded toward the kitchen. She's in there. She's ready. Months passed. The investigation dragged through Yellowstone County, but the evidence was absolute. I held Bailey's hand as we walked into the heavy oak doors of the state criminal courthouse. Her palm was sweaty but steady. She had stopped shaking the day they took Jean away. The video recording played in full on the courtroom's main screen. Mitchell's coded demand for the papers with the state seals. Jean's venomous threat to throw Bailey on the street. The jury barely deliberated. 2 hours. Mitchell was convicted of conspiracy to commit financial fraud and aggravated assault. The judge sentenced him to 5 years in a federal facility. His face went blank, like the life had already left him. Jean sat rigid in her orange jumpsuit. When the judge read her sentence 3 years for criminal child endangerment and fraud, she didn't flinch. She just stared at me with hollow eyes. Armed bailiffs grabbed them both and dragged them toward the steel door at the side of the courtroom. I watched my own sister disappear behind it. I felt nothing. The family court was different. The same video played again. But this time, a CPS agent testified about the bruises on Bailey's ribs and the psychological evaluations. The judge reviewed medical records showing patterns of malnutrition and fear responses. He looked at Bailey, now sitting in a proper coat, holding my hand, and smiled softly. He terminated Jean's parental rights permanently. Then he signed the adoption decree. I picked up the black pen, my hand steady, and signed my name. Bailey became my legal daughter. She took my last name. We walked out into the crisp Montana air, and for the first time in months, she let out a full, unguarded laugh. We were a real family. I was standing in the doorway of my bright kitchen this morning when the light hit the scattered paintbrushes just right. Bailey sat at the wide kitchen island, humming a song I didn't recognize, her tongue poking out in concentration as she swirled blue watercolor across a thick sheet of paper. Markers lay sideways, caps off, and a small puddle of pink paint had pooled near her elbow. She didn't even notice the mess. She was too lost in the picture. I walked toward the refrigerator to grab a cold water bottle. My foot caught the edge of a rug, and as I reached out to steady myself, my elbow bumped a heavy ceramic coffee mug sitting dangerously close to the counter's edge. It tipped. It fell. It crashed onto the hard tile floor with a sharp, violent crack that echoed through the whole kitchen. 2 years ago, that exact sound would have sent her spiraling into a full panic attack. She would have thrown herself off the stool, curled into a ball under the table, covered her head, and shrieked apologies until she ran out of breath. I would have sat on the floor beside her for 20 minutes, waiting for the trembling to stop. Today, Bailey did not flinch. She stopped humming for half a second, looked down at the broken shards of ceramic, and let out a soft giggle. "I'll get the broom." "Mom," she said casually, already hopping off her stool and padding to the closet. She returned with the dustpan and swept up the pieces without a single question. No fear. No brace for impact. Just a 10-year-old girl cleaning up a mess because that's what you do. I stood there in the warm sunlight, watching her dump the shards into the trash. And I felt the deep, ugly scar inside my chest finally stop aching. The bruises on her ribs are long gone. The nightmares stopped coming about 6 months after the trial. She laughs now, loudly, without checking to see if anyone is watching. She argues with me about bedtime. She leaves her shoes in the middle of the hallway. She is a normal, annoying, beautiful child. True family has nothing to do with blood. Blood can create a monster. Family is the person who stands in front of you when the darkness tries to swallow you whole. I fought a brutal war for this girl. And I won absolutely everything. I stood there in the warm sunlight, watching her dump the ceramic shards into the trash, and I felt the deep, ugly scar inside my chest finally stop aching. The bruises on her ribs are long gone. The nightmares stopped coming about 6 months after the trial. She laughs now, loudly, without checking to see if anyone is watching. She argues with me about bedtime. She leaves her shoes in the middle of the hallway. She is a normal, annoying, beautiful child. 2 years ago, the sound of a falling mug would have sent her diving under the table, covering her head, screaming apologies until she ran out of breath. Today, she just giggled and said, "I'll get the broom." Mom, that one sentence was the proof I needed the scars were healing. The fear was finally gone. True family has nothing to do with blood. Blood can create a monster. Family is the person who stands in front of you when the darkness tries to swallow you whole. I fought a brutal war for this girl. And I won absolutely everything. If you've ever had to fight for someone you love, or if you've ever been the one who needed someone to stand in front of you, I hope you know that you deserve that fierce protection. Share your own story in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you found your real family. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice and healing. Stay safe. And always protect the people who matter most